I think I'd make a good conductor.
Yeah, you do a bit of conducting in here of a morning sometimes, don't you?
Anyway, the Proms.
It is the Proms.
And then there's last night at the Proms, and everybody gets... Well, they obviously take a few drinks and whatever, and they wave flags and they all whatever, and they celebrate classic music. Now, the Proms is an event that stretches through the summer. It dates back to the 19th century.
However, recently, some have levelled criticism at the event, taking issue with, among other things, the singing, I think, of Rule Britannia. It says swinging, but you never know. And accompanied by flag waving. Apparently, it's a staple of the festivities. But do they have a point? Is it time the Proms changed its ways to become more modern? Well, not according to Paul, who's been in touch this morning. Thanks for your email, Paul. Oh, my goodness, my blood pressure has gone through the roof. What is the matter with these people? Why can't they leave our British institutions alone? I shall be watching the last night of the Proms at the weekend, as I have done for decades since a child. I will get dressed up in my Union Jack dress. I will decorate the room with bunting, pour a gin and tonic, enjoy a night of patriotism with my husband. Good, it wasn't actually. I was saying the man. Anyway, with my husband in front of the TV, which will be on full blast. That's from Pauline.
Pauline. Maybe we head round to your house on Saturday night, Pauline.
Sounds good.
So now let's speak to Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, Royal Broadcaster and historian, he's a Mr. Proms man. He's in favour of that. And beside Rafe is Katie Menasse. Now, Katie, you're a classical musical consultant specialising in diversity of classical music. So when people talk about changing the Proms or bringing it up to date or whatever, what do you think is meant by that, Katie? And can you give us a sort of indication of maybe what is the music that you would get that would have people standing on their feet?
So classical music is largely rooted in recreating historical music, and when people go to listen to classical music and indeed perform it, they have a huge amount of the joy that they have from that is in knowing the music and being able to sing along and feeling really connected with that and remembering the other times when they've heard it. So I do really understand the history of the occasion, and obviously the flag waving event at the end of the Proms is the most seminal example of that. The history, obviously, that we are celebrating in doing that is in British history is one of imperialism and colonialism, and I just think that in 2023 we need to be thinking about what it is that we're waving our flags to, and whether these are still ideals that we want to be.
OK, well, let's get the views of Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. That view, Kate expressed there, shared by Harry and Meghan's cellist from their wedding. She says she doesn't really understand why there is a space in modern society for this kind of harking back to imperial times. Do you agree?
I don't, and I'm so tired of all of this constant introspection from, the BBC and our elite institutions, navel gazing, self-loathing almost. It's corrosive and it's nihilistic to, the fabric of our nation. The reality here, of course, is that our cultural elites, the BBC and others, are embarrassed by patriotism. It reminds me of George Orwell's famous quote, you may remember, when he said an English intellectual would be more ashamed to be caught standing to God Save the King than stealing from a church poor box. They have a sneering contempt for the great British public's love for the nation, but it is the great British public who pay the licence fee, and it's the great British public who love to watch this, not just on television sets, but in recent years from great public screens erected around the nation. And we know what will happen if they do remove these songs from the Proms, because it happened in 2020 when the BBC outrageously decided to ban Rule Britannia and Land of Hope and Glory before they had to do an embarrassing U-turn. They lost 40% of their viewers.
Kate, would you have any objection to, you listened to Ray's argument there, and why not just leave it to those who want to swing their flags and do everything that they do at the end of the Proms? Put it on subscription if you want, but surely it's their event. Let them have their event. Why don't you have your own event?
Well, I think that, the point that this represents the views of the great British public is not necessarily, it doesn't represent the views of all of them, right? And obviously for people who want to wave their flags to rule Britannia, I'm not here to stop them. I just think that there's a lot of other music that's available that can celebrate Britain in other ways, the beautiful countryside, the natural landscape. We've been talking about the environment this morning. There's so many ways in which this we could experience.
But what? Name that tune. Name that tune for me. What's going to get me
anything
jiggy?
by Vaughan Williams, for instance.
Right. Okay, anything by Vaughan Williams. Okay.
How would that wash with you, Rafe?
Well, look, the last night, we've got to remember, right, we're not talking about just one concert. There are 84 Proms concerts over 8 weeks. There's plenty of time to perform all of this. The actual bit of the last night we're talking about, the final concert, is just the last half where we sing Rule Britannia, Land of Hope and Glory in Jerusalem. The first half this year will have Verdi and Strauss and Wagner. So there's plenty of time, even in this concert, to incorporate other music and folk songs. I'd be very happy for it. There should be space for all here. But the idea that, Rule Britannia is somehow redolent of imperialism or condoning of slavery, as I read in the article from this royal cellist, is astounding. You have to be completely historically ignorant or stupid or simply a race activist who's being disingenuous not to know that Rule Britannia was written before we had our main British Empire. It was actually about British liberty. We won't be slaves. We have wonderful beliefs here. We're not like the Habsburgs or the Hohenzollerns. No one was thinking about race or empire at the time Rule Britannia was written. This was all about European tyrants conquering Europe, from the Russians to the French to the Austrians and Spanish, and how Britain was unique to that. And if you are actually a supporter of Britain's end to the slave trade, you should celebrate that Britannia eventually did rule the waves, because it was the Royal Navy ruling the waves that enabled Britain to bring about an end to the Atlantic slave trade.
Do you think it's interesting, Katie, that this is particularly focused in on what's deemed to be a white kind of genre of music, and yet there are awards for music of black origin, the Mobos, and no one's saying that's not diverse? There's no white people included in those awards. Why is it a one-way street when you're trying to level the playing field?
Well, I think you've just said level the playing field, and that is what it is. So ideally, it would be there wouldn't be any kind of need to identify particular areas of diversity, but that's just not the position that we're in at the moment. White classical music is an incredibly white and colonial art form, and those of us that are working in the field know that we're having these conversations every day. It's not just about Rule Britannia. We have the conversations all the time about whether Jewish performers want to perform Wagner, for instance. These kind of the need to sit alongside his history that we don't necessarily want to celebrate anymore, whilst understanding that the music, how do we separate the music from that? Should we separate the music from that? It's a debate that runs throughout this art form every day. It's
a debate we've got to bring to an end, guys. Thank you both very much indeed. A lot of food for thought, or swinging for ringing there, or whatever it is. Thank you very much indeed.